All right, guys, we're a couple minutes past the hour here, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is Brandon Bassett at Pine Cove Consulting, and thanks to everybody who's attending this webinar. We're lucky enough to have Seth Geftick, Sophos' Director of Endpoint Security Group, on with us today. He's going to walk us through the Intercept X with EDR. A couple things I wanted to mention before I kick it over to him. Just be sure that to know that this recording is being, or this presentation is being recorded, and we'll have it up and live on our YouTube page either later tomorrow or no later than, or either later today or no later than tomorrow. So be sure to check that out along with any of the archive of other webinars that we've done. Any questions that might come up, there is a questions tab on the right-hand side there of your screen. Be sure to put those in there, and I'll be sure to bring those up to Seth as we go throughout the presentation here. I'll probably save them toward the end, but if anything does come up that's pressing and timely, I'll make sure to get those things addressed as we go along. The reason we're here today, obviously, is to speak about the EDR components. It's some great new security brought by the Sophos team. And we want to make sure that we show you guys how you can have more control over your endpoint security. The EDR portion is for endpoint detection and response. And so I'm looking forward to hearing Seth and what he has to tell us about this new technology. Pine Cove Consulting is, I guess we're headquartered in Bozeman, Montana, but that's just because that's where we get our mail. We work across Montana and Wyoming for the most part, but you can see from our map there, we've done a lot of business outside of those two states as well. We've been in the industry for 25 years now. We're excited to be in our 25th year. We provide solutions and support for school districts and businesses who are in need. We serve on a couple of councils, including the Meta Network Security Council and also on Sophos' National Cybersecurity Board. It's great to be able to have a voice directly with those guys and help guide them and be led by them as trends in the industry continue to change. I think with that, there's not much more you need to hear from me. I'd like to kick it over to Seth Geftick.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Pine Cove, for having us. We're really excited and always excited to work with Pine Cove, one of our favorite partners, not just in the US, but across the world. Pine Cove's on our partner advisory council. We worked really closely with them. So I think everyone on this call is lucky to have a partner like Pine Cove. And so are we here at Sophos. So today we're very excited to talk about Intercept X Advanced with EDR. And the key word or phrase here is EDR, endpoint detection and response. So those of you who have been following the endpoint security space for a while know that endpoint detection response has sort of become a buzzword over the last couple of years. And I'm going to explain why, explain how we've incorporated that technology in our Intercept X product, and how it can help you in your day-to-day job. So endpoint detection response, or EDR, came about probably about 5 years ago. It started to really gain traction. And the reason people started looking at endpoint detection response is they wanted to get a little deeper in their endpoint protection. So while we try to stop as much as we can in terms of threats, right? Obviously, the more things we can stop from ever hitting your endpoints, the happier we are and the happier you are. But for a while, endpoint security really was lagging behind the threats, and there wasn't enough innovation in endpoint security. So endpoint detection and response came about, and the idea there, the primary one, said we want to give more visibility and a better ability to detect what got through the front door. So maybe your endpoint protection missed something. We want to be able to find it even after it's executed, after it started to run, potentially even after it started to do some damage in your environment, and also to eliminate those blind spots. So I'm sure many of you have heard stories about organizations that had been under attack for weeks, months, sometimes even years before they ever found out that an intruder was in their network and lurking. EDR is intentionally built to snuff those attackers out and find them if they are lurking your network, as well as to investigate and analyze attacks that are looking suspicious or things that got through endpoint protection. So organizations really struggle to do this because usually we try to block as much stuff as possible, and then if we want to do more beyond that, we either are suffering because we don't have enough data to really know what's going on in our environment, or we have so much information that we really don't have the tools or the team to sift through that entire haystack to see if there's any more needles that we might have missed. So EDR came about to try to do better analysis and deeper investigations into any type of suspicious activity on our endpoints. And the goal there is so that we could then respond faster, right? So when we do have an incident, we want to respond faster, we want to respond with more accuracy, and we want to respond in a more efficient manner. But the problem there is that most teams want to do incident response, but either don't have enough talent or don't have enough hours in the day to actually go detect, investigate, and respond to incidents that aren't being proactively blocked, right? And there is no team in the world, whether you're a one-person shop, at a school district somewhere in Idaho, or you are, a 100-person shop at a bank in New York City. Everyone has the same problem. We need more talent. It's harder to retain talent. It's only so many hours in the day to do our jobs. And certainly IT and security, that is very, very true. So EDR came about to try to solve these problems. But the problem with most EDR tools is they really tend to struggle. I mean, at first, they look like they might get good traction, they might help out organizations, but they tend to be really difficult to use. So that ramp up curve can be really steep for a lot of organizations, actually for all organizations. So EDR tools historically are very complex to operate. And even though the tools themselves are complicated and have a lot of information, there still has to be a team full of human beings on the other end of the screen that have to know the right questions to ask. They have to know how to interpret the data. And so essentially these products are very much dependent on a team of security experts in order to get value out of the tool that you just spent money on. And in that case, they don't provide the value that they really have promised historically. One of the reasons is because they are very reactive technology. When something happens, you go look for it, and they're not really combined or using proactive protection to stop the threats in the first place. Responses are not automated, and what happens there is that the EDR tool tends to get overloaded. So much gets missed on the front end. There's so much data that essentially security teams, IT teams are drowning in a sea of alerts, and lots of times organizations are just completely overwhelmed by the amount of alerts getting pumped out of their EDR tool that they say, no thanks, let's just ignore all of these all the time and only use this thing for spot investigations here and there. So essentially you're paying for a lot of functionality that you'll never use. And the third issue historically with endpoint detection response tools is they're just really resource intensive. So not only just being financially intensive, being expensive, but they take a lot of time to use and they require a dedicated staff. So generally people have been shy about adopting EDR technology because they don't want to hire multiple full-time employees to then run the tool that they just purchased, right? It's a nice luxury to have the ability to hire and retain multiple people to use the tool that you just spent budget on, but very few organizations really have the ability to do that. As a result, customers have been completely overwhelmed with the incident response and investigation process. So certainly everyone in this call has had a situation where there was some sort of potential incident. It may not even have been bad, but something looked funny, right? That's a technical term. Looked funny on my network. Something strange was going on. We didn't block it, or even if we blocked it, we wanted to know more. So you start asking questions, right? Am I currently under attack? Is there something that I'm missing here? If I did see an attack, and let's say I blocked it on one machine, is that the only machine that was impacted? Is the attack over? Has it spread? What files were impacted? What machines were impacted? Those are questions that we all ask ourselves all the time as part of incident response. The same thing when we have multiple alerts going on. Which of these are really important? Which one of these can I ignore? Which one of these can I save for later? How do I prioritize my work? And then one of the biggest questions is, okay, how many times you've been asked, are we safe? What's our security posture looking like? And does any of this attack impact our compliance status, right? Certainly those of you that are in government or higher education or healthcare or financial, you all have some serious regulations that you have to follow, and not having visibility into what's going on your endpoint makes it really difficult to answer those questions about an incident. So when someone says, are we protected against this threat? Or is the threat over? is there something we need to worry about with our data, with our intellectual property? It's really hard to answer that question if you don't have an endpoint detection and response tool to give you the visibility and the analytical tools to really understand what's going on. So because of this, the difficulty of EDR in the marketplace and the need for EDR technology, we've introduced Intercept X Advanced with EDR. So essentially what we've done is taken the best endpoint protection in the market and added additional detection, investigation, and response capabilities, which is why we say the best just got better. So we had the best endpoint protection, and now we've expanded the comprehensiveness of our endpoint protection offering with EDR technology. And we're really excited about it, and the response so far has been incredible, really off the charts. And when we looked at EDR, we said we need to do something different here, right? We know endpoint detection response is a important suite of tools and technology that our customers want, but we have to do it in a smarter manner, which is why we called it intelligent EDR. So rather than build a completely separate tool that just does endpoint detection response, we combined EDR with our Intercept X product. So we strongly believe that EDR starts with the best protection, and the better protection you have, the better your endpoint detection response tool will respond as well. Analysts have agreed with this. This is something that we've really seen the market shift a lot, is combine those technologies. So when we build our EDR, we start with the strongest protection with Intercept X. The second thing that makes us intelligent is we have injected expertise into the product. So taking the best skills and a lot of the work that really sophisticated security analysts would do as part of their detection and incident response process, taking that expertise, injected in the product so that you can add all that skill, but without having to add any headcount. Essentially, we've built a product that you could take the team that you have today, even if that's a very small team, and still be able to use this product, which is something that most organizations most EDR products can't do. In fact, almost none of them can do. They almost always require you to hire staff just to use an EDR tool. Which brings us to our third thing that makes us intelligent, is that this concept of guided incident response. So as part of your incident response process, when you use an EDR tool, sometimes that can be complicated. And if you don't have a tool at all, it can be even more complex because you don't have the data to look at. But we've done is build a product that will guide you through the incident response process. It really makes it a lot more intuitive and a lot easier for teams of all maturity levels to approach EDR, including those who EDR was unapproachable in the past, right? So something that we really are proud of, and something that we've made it accessible, this technology accessible in a way that it never was in the past. So let's dig through each of these in a little bit more detail. So EDR starts with the strongest protection. Why do we think this is important? What we've done is consolidate the best endpoint protection in the market, adding intelligent endpoint detection response, and that's where we get Intercept X Advanced with EDR. So this is a single SKU, single agent, single product. So you essentially get one product that not only has EDR, but has all of the technologies from Intercept X Advanced, including deep learning, malware detection, anti-exploit technology, ransomware specific technology, and all of those foundational techniques, the classic antivirus techniques that have been really effective at stopping known threats for 2 decades now. And the reason it's important to combine these is we want to stop as many breaches as we can before they ever start. So if your EDR tool is built to detect things that you might have missed in the first place, or dive deeper into any type of questionable activity, well, the more malicious activity that you can block in the front end means that your EDR workload will be significantly lighter on the back end, right? The more things you stop and from filtering into your environment, the more resources you'll have to look at the most important events, the pressing events, so that you can address the top things going on and not have to deal with all the noise that generally IT teams have to deal with. A good analogy here is, a lot of endpoint incident response is trying to find a needle in a haystack. And the way technology has tried to react to that is by collecting as many needles as possible. Collecting as much hay as possible. So I want to make my haystack as big as possible to ensure that the needles are in there somewhere. Well, you can imagine that just makes it harder and harder to find the needles. So what we've done is actually shrink the haystack, get rid of all of that noise, and illuminate the needle so you could find the needle in the haystack a little bit better. So I mentioned that we have the best endpoint protection on the planet. For those of you who are already Intercept X customers, thank you. You probably already know this already. For those of you who aren't, we consistently rate at the top of third-party endpoint protection tests. So SE Labs, a really respected endpoint testing house. They're the first testing house certified by AMTSO, which is the Anti-Malware Testing Standards Organization, a really great organization that we are part of. We've gotten AAA ratings now in multiple tests in the row. In the April test, we were ranked #1 for both enterprise and small business protection, with the highest detection rate of any vendor looked at in that test. We've also been really well received by other third-party testing houses like MRG Effitas. So back earlier in the year, they did a vendor breakdown where they looked at us versus several other different endpoint protection vendors, looking at unknown, never seen before malware. And we came in #1 on that test, so essentially having the best malware detection engine available. As well as later in the year, they did a separate test only looking at exploit-based attacks and fileless attacks. So something that's a little bit more sophisticated from an attacker perspective, something that's been on the rise the last few years, and something that endpoint protection struggles more. And we absolutely crushed anyone else that was in that test, stopping twice as many exploits as the next closest competitor there. So really proud of our third-party testing, really proud of our ranking from analysts. Gartner, we've been a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, one of only 3 leaders in the Magic Quadrant. And we've been a leader for, I think it's 10 straight years. As many years have they done the test. Forrester does the endpoint wave, they call it a wave at Forrester. Again, we're a leader there, have been for many, many years running, is one of the leading endpoint protection products out there. So both analysts give us great feedback, third-party testing validates that we do have the best endpoint protection. Of course, partners and customers, some of you on the phone here have given us amazing case studies, amazing results. Those are the things that we value the most. So when we say we have the best endpoint protection, we've added EDR, we really mean that. The next thing we've done here is add expertise into the product. So we know that most organizations do not have the luxury of having a security operations center or critical emergency response team or incident response team, a CERT, a CERC, a SOC. The most mature, the top 1% of security teams on the planet, they tend to have fully staffed, teams of 5, 10, 15, 20 analysts working 24/7, 365, with different tiers of analysts trying to do different roles as part of an incident response process. That is great, and that really works well if you're a massive defense industrial base organization or a massive financial, but for the rest of the 99% of us, we just don't have that luxury. And what we've done is taken the skills and a lot of the technique that those really advanced teams have and injected it into our product so that you essentially can get that same value, but with the team you have today. So the way a typical security operations center would work is they'd have capabilities from different analysts that are really hard to find, hard to train, hard to retain. But this is essentially how they would work a typical case. So they'd have a team of security analysts, and they're usually either the frontline defense, where they're looking at all the alerts coming in across their tools. They're prioritizing those, saying, hey, I've got 5 alerts in right now. These are the 4 most important of those alerts. 2 of these, I'm pretty sure that I can handle right away. There's something that easily, take me a few minutes, but I can respond on my own. And then these other 2 alerts, I'm not skilled enough to handle. What I want to do is escalate those and send those to some specialists on my team. And those specialists might be like a malware analyst. So a lot of really advanced teams have someone on their team that their primary job is to do reverse engineering of malware, to do code analysis, to really understand if you see a file that looks a little strange, right? So how did this get on one of my users' machines? I don't think this should be there. How do you know if it's good or bad? Well, in addition to asking third-party repositories if they've ever seen it before, they might also start breaking down, running that file in a sandbox, looking at its code to see if this is in fact malicious. Is this benign? Is this something that isn't malicious but is like PUA, potentially unwanted application. Good example of that would be like a crypto miner or adware, so something you certainly don't want running on machines. So we've taken the roles of malware analysts and replicated that, put that in a product. And the same thing with a threat intelligence analyst. Threat intelligence analyst's job would be to take third-party threat intelligence feeds. Sometimes those are paid feeds, so people subscribe and pay a lot of money to threat intelligence companies to pay for custom feeds, or they could be public feeds. So one you might get from an ISAC or government organization, and you might take all that information, try to integrate it and merge it with your data, interpret the feeds, and figure out if any of that intelligence can benefit you. So a threat intelligence analyst would do that. Again, most people that we deal with do not have the luxury of hiring threat intelligence analysts. At best, they might have someone on their team who can do that as a sort of a side job. But what we've done is taken the role of a threat intelligence analyst and, again, injected in the product, replicated those capabilities so you could get the same capabilities, but without having to hire someone just to do that. So how do we do that? So one way is looking at security analysts. So one of the jobs of a security analyst would be to do basic detection, searches, sometimes called hunting throughout their environment. And this is really helpful. So a good scenario here would be, let's say you saw something unusual in your environment and you wanted to see, hey, where else in my environment does this threat exist? You could easily now search and see that activity across all your endpoints, not just the one you were looking at. Another common scenario here would be someone comes and says, hey, there's a new threat that we read about. In this case, let's say the first one is called WannaCry. We all know WannaCry from a few years ago, the big ransomware attack. Hey, I want to know, hey, do we have any elements, indicators of compromise that we have found from these attacks? Maybe we read in a third-party report. So great, we can, if we have a hash, let's say, we can search all of our environment based on that hash, based on that file name, and see if that exists anywhere. Another one that comes up quite often is a lot of organizations get threat intelligence sent to them from government agencies or industry groups. So US CERT is a good example. The US Computer Emergency Response Team, essentially they're the government watchdog looking at all the networks. And they often will say in an organization, hey, we saw some suspicious activity either in your environment or in, let's say, all types of county government agencies. We've seen this over and over. You should check your environment to see if anything looks like that you're dealing with. Without things like an endpoint detection response capabilities, EDR, that's a really difficult project to tackle. Now it's a simple search, right? So I take those indicators of compromise, I put them in my threat search box, and boom, I can go see all of different activity related to that search. But we're taking this even further. So a capability that didn't quite make it into the product that was just released a couple weeks ago, but the next version or soon after in early 2019 will have automated detection and prioritization of threats using the machine learning that we have in-house. So Sophos is really lucky to have one of the best teams of data scientists in the world. They're part of our Sophos Labs group. And what they've done is taken all of the threat intelligence and all the different artificial intelligence models that they've built, and they're looking throughout the environment to say, let's take the stuff that we've blocked out of the equation. What else is left? Let me look at all of that activity using machine learning, identify the activity that we think deserves the highest priority, assign it a threat score, rank it by the threat score, tell you how many endpoints were affected by that particular attack. So we saw this dropper.exe, which was probably distributing malware. It got a red threat score of 31, which means, hey, this is a high priority. You should go look into this. So one of your questions might be, well, if I have Sophos, why do I need to look into anything? Shouldn't we block that already, right? It's a fair question. And certainly if we know something is bad or something exceeds a risk threshold, absolutely 100%. If we detect it, we're going to block it. But there is this area, sort of a gray zone, where something looks suspicious, right? The risk level is elevated, but it's not so obviously suspicious and so obviously malicious that we're going to convict it automatically. And this is where having an EDR tool and having human beings need to step in, which is, we think this deserves more attention. you need to go look at it. Here are the tools for you to go do that, and here's the steps we would take. And then you can make a yes, no decision, block, allow, or potentially investigate further there. The suspicious events module really makes that even easier by using machine learning to prioritize those incidents and telling you which ones that you need to go look at immediately. Another cool thing we've done is integrate threat intelligence analysis directly into the product. So I mentioned Sophos Labs before. They're really one of probably a handful of probably 5 or so teams on Earth that have this level of sophistication that they do in terms of being able to see as much activity across endpoints and networks, and having a team of threat intelligence analysts and threat researchers who actually can make heads and tails of all that information. So some of you might have read a lot of the Sophos Labs reports that they've put out. If you go to, I think it's sophos.com/labs, you'd be able to see all of that. Our data science team's there. They post a lot of pretty technical analysis. Sometimes it goes over my head, but we have this amazing resources, and a lot of what they do feeds into our product on the back end, so you wouldn't necessarily see it on a day-to-day basis, but it certainly influences our product roadmap. But we now said, hey, we have this amazing resource between these data scientists, the threat researchers, and now we want to do is give you access to Sophos Labs, give their curated threat intelligence, where they can take the best third-party threat intelligence, the best Sophos-specific threat intelligence, combine it all together, curate it, cut out the noise, and give you the best intelligence on demand when you need it. So for a good example, if you're looking at a threat case, something called recipeaddictstool.exe in this case popped up. Sophos says, hey, this is looking pretty bad in terms of reputation. What I want to do is hit this request latest intelligence button here, and I want to send it off to Sophos Labs, and in about a minute or so, they'll send back whatever information that they have on this file. So that would include a high-level summary of the file, the properties, if you really want to geek out, the file breakdown. But one of the coolest things that we've added is this tab called machine learning analysis. So those of you who know Sophos for a while, we've been talking about deep learning, malware analysis. You hear the buzzwords machine learning, artificial intelligence. There are terms that are used throughout the industry now. They're really important in terms of detecting attacks in a way that we couldn't in the past. And certainly that is a huge differentiator for Sophos, and one that we have already in Intercept X, and that's one of our main protection methods. But we've now taken that same machine learning technology and allowed it for analysis. So I mentioned before that most advanced SOC teams have a malware analyst on staff. And that malware analyst would do things like reverse engineer malware, run it to find out exactly what's going on, so they can make a yes-no decision on a suspicious file. So using the machine learning analysis tab, now when you submit files to Sophos Labs, you would get the breakdown of the file, all the different attributes, all the different code elements of that file, broken down for you and seen in a way that you could compare it to historically known good and known bad files. And this is essentially the same way that we build machine learning models. So we look at millions of different attributes about a file, compare it to the entire known universe of malware, and say, based on this, the DNA of this file looks 80% like this other thing that was bad, and therefore we're going to assume it's also bad. So in this case, you could see different attributes about the file. Even if you don't necessarily know what all of those attributes mean, and it would be completely understandable if you didn't, I could say, wow, this showed up in 51,000 malicious files, the same attribute, but it showed up in about 118,000 benign files, good files. So I can try to look at that information, say it's certainly raising alarm bells. Maybe it's bad enough they want to block it right away. The same thing for code similarity, where we'll actually break down essentially the DNA of the file and compare it to the universe of known good and known bad items. So in this case, I can see that more than half of the DNA or the code of the the file I'm looking at is similar to something called runplus.exe. I may not know what runplus.exe is, but I could see it as a red exclamation point next to it. So I'm saying this is pretty similar to something that we know is definitely bad out there, and therefore maybe I want to make the decision to clean and block, right? You could see in the upper right corner here, you could simply do that on demand once you analyze the file. The takeaway here is you're getting really, really sophisticated malware analysis, and you can now do this as an IT generalist without having to have real malware expertise. This is something that I know we've tested with many, many customers, and they've been able to look at malware in a level that really advanced teams were only able to do in the past, but without having to get trained on malware, without having to get trained on malware analysis, they're able to get a lot more clarity into whether a file is good or bad when they're looking into it. So really cool stuff there. So taking a step back, a lot of this leads to the ability to respond to incident where we not just want to detect something that looks suspicious, but then dig deeper, investigate, analyze, and respond. And all of these are done to answer those tough questions you have about an incident. So whether you use our product, whether you use EDR in general, or whether you just hope to answer these questions, these are things that we have to answer every day as part of our jobs, right? If we do see suspicious activity, are we under attack? What's the scope and the impact of this? You know, classic, is this a big deal? Is this not a big deal? Should we be panicking? Should we need to report this? Right? Those are your first questions that you probably ask every single time. And okay, what do we do about it? We also want to know, is there something that's missing that our endpoint protection is missing out on? So what about that gray zone, right? The attacks that were suspicious, but not so obviously bad that we block them automatically. How do I know if there's any of those or attacks happening that just went completely unnoticed? We want to be able to search for indicators of compromise across our network. So if we do get given a clue that something's happening, how do we then take that clue and be able to start an investigation? Once we have a set of alerts, how do we know which ones are the most important? Which ones should we prioritize? If we have some activity, how do we know if that file itself is a potential threat? Is it a false positive? Is it something that's bad, but certainly not so bad that we need to, we need to sound the alarm bells? We could just take care of it. And then really one of the big drivers here is the ability to report on your security or compliance posture at any given moment. So that's always the tough question, right? If there is an attack, right, your board, your executives, your senior management might come to you and say, did we stop it? How bad was it? What was affected? Is it over? Are we sure we're not going to get hit by this again? EDR gives you the ability to answer those questions in a lot more clarity and a lot more accuracy than you ever would be able to in the past. And by using guided investigations, you're able to do that today, right? So that's something that's now approachable to you. It's not just a tool, it's a methodology. So for example, one of the things we've done here is break down attack scenarios into really simple steps. So I could see up here that W. Morris's PC, that was the user that was impacted. The program that was exploited in this case was Outlook. Outlook ran a file called badthing.exe. That was probably a good tip right there that it was malware. But badthing.exe tried to run. We detected it. We blocked it and cleaned it. Right. So we know exactly what the kind of the major steps were of this incident. We would then suggest next steps. Hey, we should set the priority for nuke. This is a new case. It's a high priority. We recommend investigating the processes that we've marked with uncertain reputation. Go check that out. While you're going to investigate, a really cool feature is you can actually isolate that endpoint. So isolate that computer so that you can essentially knock it offline. So if there is a threat going on there, the attacker can't do anything and the attack can't spread throughout your environment, but you'll still be able to remote access into that machine to investigate what's going on. So if you think about what you would do today if there was an incident, you'd probably essentially knock the machine offline, unplug it, and if you had the ability to dig into the machine to see if there's really a threat there, or potentially just go ahead, wipe it and rebuild it to play it safe. Now you can actually isolate that machine while you remotely or in person investigate. And then if you do figure out what's going on, respond quite quickly. You can also do things like create an on-demand scan, create a threat case here, which is a visual representation of what the attacker was trying to do. For those of you who are Intercept X customers today, this is formerly called root cause analysis. We've done is taken root cause analysis, which we now call threat cases, and with EDR brought it to another level. So in addition to having these spider graphs, there's another view where you could just see a simple spider graph if those graphs ever looked a little too complicated for you, and made the the chart itself completely interactive. So anything you click on there, so if you see something, let's say that has an orange triangle, you know it's suspicious, I can click on that file. I then can submit that file to Sophos Labs, find out all the latest intelligence on it, find out the file breakdown, the code similarity, and do a deep dive investigation right there from the threat case. Once you do decide, hey, this thing is in fact bad, it's a single click option for incident response, where now you can not only clean that machine, but you can block that file on every machine in entire environment, leave some notes for your teammates to let them know what it was and why you did it. This is also reversible. So if, let's say, you went ahead and cleaned and blocked something, you actually have the ability to reverse that action pretty easily in the admin console. So when you want to think about the entire detection, investigation, and response lifecycle, the last piece here is being able to respond, and doing that in a single click of a button saves you a lot of time and makes you much more likely to stay one step ahead of the attackers. So let's put this whole scenario together. So this is a day in the life of an analyst. It's also the day in the life of a security analyst or just an IT generalist. Pretty much all of us who work in the space have to do this. So in this case, using Intercept X Advanced with EDR, we might see an incident that gets escalated to us. This case was called dropper.exe. That was a suspicious events module. Maybe you discovered it on your own. Maybe it came from a third party as an indicator of compromise. Perhaps it was part of another attack that you had seen, and this is a clue that you wanted to dive into. Either way, we've identified this incident called dropper.exe. That's step one. Well, as you can see, based on my threat cases, that dropper.exe distributed malware. In this case, the malware was blocked, but the actual dropper, the thing that was distributing the malware, wasn't necessarily bad enough that you would say this is malicious. Now, certainly if it's distributing malware, that's probably a very obvious clue that it's something you want to get rid of, but not necessarily. It could be a legitimate program that's being exploited. So before I go ahead and block dropper.exe, I want to see, okay, is this just a one-off? Does it exist anywhere else in my environment? So in a single click, I can then search for dropper.exe. I can see, yes, in fact, it does exist on 3 other devices. Okay, this might be a little more widespread than I originally thought. Well, how do I know dropper.exe is bad? So let me go dig into the file a bit. I'm going to ask Sophos Labs to give me a threat intelligence report on this file. And then I'm also going to look at the machine learning analysis and start to do deep learning file analysis, determine if this is good, this is bad, potentially unwanted. And you can see pretty quickly here, even again, without being a malware expert, that, okay, it's not signed. In most cases, that means that it's malicious, or that malware has that attribute. It also has something called unknown packs. I don't know what that is, but I know that that's more likely to be a trait of malware than it is for a legitimate program. And I could also see from the DNA of this file, the code similarity, that it's 99% similar to something called x69.exe. Again, that's got a red exclamation point next to it. I know that's bad. Therefore, there were enough clues here. I said, I don't like this thing. I'm going to go ahead and block it so I don't have to deal with it anymore. In a single click, you can see right on that screen there, you can see clean and block, which would eliminate the file, block it from any other machine in my environment. And I can take some notes, again, keeping track of exactly what happened as part of the incident response process. So these are all the steps that you would probably file today. They're just going to take you a lot longer with a lot less accuracy and a lot more hoops you have to jump through in order to get this data. Intercept X Advanced with EDR gives you all that information at the tip of your fingertips, but done so in a way that has guided incident response. So everyone on this call should have the ability to actually do a sophisticated detection, investigation, and response process, and also do in a way that is injecting expertise thanks to machine learning, Sophos Labs threat intelligence, so that you have a lot of the same capabilities as really mature, really sophisticated security teams, but without having to hire a single person in order to replicate those skills. One thing to reiterate is, for those, especially those of your customers today, this is a separate upgrade, right? So it is not included in Intercept X Advanced. This is a new offering called Intercept X Advanced with EDR. So that is a paid upgrade if you're an existing customer. If you are not a customer today, you would get EDR capabilities, but you would still then also get all of the advanced protections, deep learning, anti-exploit, anti-ransomware, as well as those core or foundational protections of antivirus, all in a single agent, all in a single product. So you get everything from protection, detection, investigation, and response together. So we've been really happy with the response to Intercept X Advanced with EDR. So we had the most successful early access program in our company's history. So we had over 30,000 people, 30,000 endpoints using the product, 900 different customers, and the response was absolutely overwhelmingly positive, both by the excitement that we were offering this, as well as the capabilities that they were able to use. A good example of this is CNS Healthcare. So they're a small security team. I think they had, when I spoke to them, I think they had just a couple of people that do most of their IT and security. Typical healthcare, I think they're out in Florida. They're in Florida. In addition to being a hospital, they're also a research facility, so certainly more prone to a lot of sophisticated attacks. And they absolutely love the EDR products. They talked about how it made their team more efficient. So if they found something that was unidentified before, a zero-day threat or something they missed, they're able to see quickly if this affects any other users in their environment, any other endpoints in their environment, and take necessary action all from Sophos Central. If you look at the press release that came out with Intercept X Advanced, you'll see some more quotes from CNS Healthcare. They absolutely love the malware analysis. They talked about how being able to take notes and actually document their incident response process really helped with the communication across the team. And they love the guided investigations as well. So just one example, we've had, I've seen dozens of these come across my desk, mostly not public yet, but all people who have adopted Intercept X Advanced with EDR and have really had to change the way that they operate as an IT team. It's really exciting stuff. So to sum up, we took the best endpoint protection and made it even better by adding EDR. So now with intelligent EDR, you have the ability to add expertise without having to add headcount and have guided incident response with single-click response capabilities. So you can now detect attacks you might have been missing in the past, investigate suspicious activity, understand your security posture and your compliance posture at any given moment, and have visibility and capabilities that you just didn't have the access to in the past. So with that, I think we have about 15 minutes left. I'm happy to take any questions that are out there.
Thanks so much, Seth. That was great stuff. I think a few questions that did come through, I think you answered there toward the end with stating what comes with Intercept X versus what comes with the EDR and how they're a little bit separated. A couple questions here. What would you say is the top reason that a team adopts EDR?
I mean, I think historically, people got EDR because they wanted to hunt for threats or essentially detect threats that they were missing, right? A lot of it was, hey, I'm worried that I'm not blocking everything. I want to make sure I'm not under attack. I just don't know it. What I've seen is a shift, especially when it comes to Sophos customers, is really it's a lot about just the visibility, right? It's about being able to answer those tough questions so that you could always at any moment answer questions about your security and your compliance posture, right? A lot of it is, hey, I get asked a lot about a specific threat, or if we were under attack, I need to show that we stopped it and nothing was affected, or we're just getting checked on it. How's everything going? Kind of basic questions. And EDR gives you the ability to look at that, report on it very simply in a way that was much more difficult than in the past. So obviously there's the strict security benefit of EDR, being able to of detection, but a lot of what I think our customers are really liking is actually the visibility and the reporting that you have now the ability to get from it.
Excellent. Another one that came in, if I'm a small organization, can I still use EDR?
Yeah, you can. So one of the things that we are really proud of is that we built what we call intelligent EDR, and we made it approachable for IT teams of all sizes and maturity. So in the past, to use a tool like this, you really needed to hire extra staff that had all of those really hard to find capabilities and hard to find analysts. But by using machine learning, by using Sophos Labs threat intelligence, and by making it the incident response process guided, this is a much more approachable tool than it's ever been in the past. So teams of all shapes and sizes can use this. I spoke to a customer out on the West Coast. They only had one person on their security team, and he's like, this is a game changer for me because I'm so small, I don't have 3 or 4 people that can go dig into data all day and spend hours on wild goose chases. This makes it so that my incident response process is much faster. I have much more visibility into the blind spots I had before. And in a single click, I can go ahead and take care of something. Whereas in the past, I had to knock that machine offline. I had to rebuild it. Now I can isolate the machine, find out what's going on, and respond in a single click. So, I think if you're interested in diving a little deeper into any suspicious activity, this is something you need to look at.
I've got one more question here, but before I put it out there, I think I'll just mention one more time that a recording of this webinar is going to be on the Pine Cove YouTube page by tomorrow. So if you missed anything or you want to share this with other people in your organization, be sure to visit our YouTube page and you can see it again there. Seth, if I'm a current Intercept X customer, what is the process for adding this into my central console?
I mean, technically, it's really easy. So you work with Pine Cove. It's essentially a license change. So obviously, it's a paid upgrade if it's an existing customer. You could work with them on that piece. So essentially, you would upgrade from Intercept X or Intercept X Advanced or even Central Endpoint Protection to Intercept X Advanced with EDR. Sorry for a lot of words. Essentially, you upgrade to the EDR version of the product, and then it's a simple reboot of the machine. So there's not a second agent to install. It's all essentially just an upgrade from a licensing perspective. So it's very easy from a deployment standpoint.
Good. Well, if there's any follow-up questions or any interest in getting to know this product a little better, be sure to reach out to our Pine Cove team here. We'd be happy to help in any way that we can. And Seth, we just really appreciate your time with us today. Really good information, and I know you're busy, so we really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Happy to work with Pine Cove any chance I get. So thanks, everyone. Really, really appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.